Hi everyone, I'm Shelley and you're watching There's No Place Like Home. I'm back with yet another Question the Narrative video. This one was unplanned. I usually do not record videos on the weekend, but I came across this topic and I had this idea and I just thought, you know what, I'm just going to go with it and record the video while it's still fresh in my mind. I will tell you though that I'm waiting for my 13-year-old daughter to come home from her friend's house because yes, homeschoolers do socialize, but I didn't want to wait any longer. So today's topic is this evidence of how the giants survived the flood? Now, first of all, I would like to dedicate this video to Dr. Michael Heiser, who passed away last week, and I'm very sad to hear of his passing, but I know there was rejoicing in heaven when he got there. So hopefully one day I will get to meet him there. But anyway, yeah, it was from reading his book, Demons, that I actually started to think about this possibility. So there are a lot of different theories about how the giants could have possibly survived the flood. And first of all, I have to point out that not everyone does believe that the giants survived the flood. Many people believe that there was another incursion of the sons of God after the flood, and that is how the other giants came to be. I believe differently, though, and part of the reason for that is there are actually several reasons for that. But let's just go to what brought this topic to my mind to begin with. So many of you know that there are two separate terms for the giants. The giants before the flood are known as Nephilim, whereas the giants after the flood are very often called rephaim. And I never really understood the difference. I do know, though, that several places in the Bible, it does say that the rephaim came from the Nephilim. So if all of the Nephilim were wiped out in the flood, the rephaim wouldn't very well be able to come from the Nephilim, now would they? So that's one aspect of it. Another aspect of it is just the fact that the giants before the flood were thought to be much, much larger than after the flood. And one reason for that was very possibly because they were the original giants. They were the ones that came directly from the sons of God. So they had that, I don't want to say pure, but that strong genetic bloodline from the sons of God. And over time, it makes sense that it would have been watered down and the giants would have gotten smaller over time. So if these giants did get smaller over time, and I have to say that another reason that they were likely larger before the flood was just because it is thought that there was more oxygen in the atmosphere before the flood. So not only would the giants have been bigger, but the people would have been bigger, the flora would have been bigger, the fauna would have been bigger, everything would have been larger. Yet that's not what we see in the Old Testament after the flood. When giants are spoken of, they are not these colossal beings that we are, that were thought to exist before the flood. They are, like Goliath, who was a giant for sure, but was more like 9'6". So not quite colossal if you think of it that way. So if there would have been a second incursion after the flood, you would think that those giants would have also been colossal because they would have had that really strong DNA from the sons of God. Yet they don't. They're smaller. So to me, that just means like a degrading over time. Just as human DNA degrades over time, their DNA would degrade over time, and they also with all of the mixing with humans, it just they would have gotten shorter and shorter and shorter, where they still would have been called giants, but weren't quite as giant as what the originals were. So back to the difference between Nephilim and rephaim, the actual names. So again, I have been reading the book Demons by Dr. Michael Heiser, and I got a little bit confused when I saw the definition of rephaim. So I'm just going to read this part to you here. Rephaim, a Hebrew word often simply transliterated in modern English Bible versions. When the term is translated, it is rendered giants. shades, or simply the dead. So that right there makes them a bit different than the Nephilim that we think of in Genesis 6. These translation choices point to the interpretive problem associated with the term. It is difficult to identify whether the rephaim were humans, living or dead, quasi-divine figures, or disembodied spirits. So, yes, definitely seeming different than Nephilim, other than just in size difference. Old Testament usage associates the term with all these possibilities, while external Semitic source texts in which the term is found, such as Ugaritic and Phoenician, do not describe the Rephaim as giants. Identification is further complicated by uncertainty regarding the term's etymology and how it is translated in the Septuagint. So now, reading directly from his book, I'm just going to read you one more thing. It says, for the purposes of the present study, the point to be made is that the biblical rephaim are supernatural residents of the underworld, a place in the spiritual plane of reality dissociated with the presence of God. So, the Nephilim they just seem pretty cut and dry giants. Yet the rephaim are described as giants, and they are also associated with the underworld. And I was trying to come up with some reason that would be. And then today I was listening to the podcast episode of Blurry Creatures, where they were interviewing Timothy Alberino about a giant that was found, that a pilot had contacted him and I believe Steve Quayle about from Afghanistan. And so this photo here, I believe, is of the Kandahar. I mean, it's not a photo, obviously. It's an illustration. This is actually from the cover of the book Long Walkers by Steve Quayle, which is a fiction book, but I do have that book. Now, in that interview, Timothy Alberino, I believe that he said that he wasn't sure if this giant is the same as the Kandahar giant that Steve Quayle has spoken about before, but that it is possible that they are the same giant. But the reason that my ears kind of perked up in the midst of this interview was that Timothy Alberino made the comment that giants typically are cave dwellers, like especially the giants of Afghanistan are cave dwellers, and they are thought to have lived underground for a length of time, and possibly because they were driven into the underground by people. So I'm just going to cite two examples that I have where giants are linked to cave systems. And one of them, now this is, I believe, the one in Kandahar, yes, which again, may or may not be the one that was spoken of in the interview that I listened to on Blurry Creatures. But this is one example of one of these giants that, came from the underground. Let's just read a little bit of it in case you haven't heard of it. The mythical, quote, mythical Kandahar giant, the biblical cryptid allegedly killed by U.S. Special Forces in Afghanistan. In 2002, an elite tactical team was said to have killed the Kandahar giant, a 13-foot-tall beast with flaming red hair, 6 fingers on each hand, and 2 sets of teeth. Now, I have to say that I've been having a discussion with some friends lately about the Nephilim, and it comes up over and over again that Nephilim are said to have either blonde or red hair. And as a redhead, I find that a bit disturbing. And they're also said to have either blue or green eyes. And as someone with blue eyes, I'm just like, whoa, okay. Anyway, I just had to get that off my chest. Anyway, in August 2016, a YouTuber, probably Steve Quayle, posted a lengthy interview with a military contractor identified only as Mr. K. In the interview, Mr. K claimed to have been present during the brutal slaughter of a killer he called the Kandahar giant. The killing of the giant, he said, took place during the height of Operation Enduring Freedom in 2002, when the military was engaged in fierce battles with the Taliban in their de facto capital in Kandahar province during the U.S. invasion of Afghanistan. but this was no human fighter. The Kandahar giant, Mr. K said, was 13 feet tall, with fiery red hair, 6 fingers, and 2 sets of teeth. And I have to say that, again, these are all characteristics that you hear repeatedly about giants. Them having red hair, 6 fingers, and yes, 2 sets of teeth. It even killed one of the Special Forces soldiers with a spear before the rest of the unit brought it down with 30 seconds of sustained gunfire. And after they radioed it in, the Army took away its corpse and has hidden it ever since. In 2002, a group of soldiers went missing while on patrol in a remote mountain region of Kandahar in the south of Afghanistan. And when they failed to make radio contact for some time, the military sent in a special ops unit to investigate, though the branch of the armed forces they belonged to was never confirmed. Then, high up in the mountains, the unit came across a cave with scattered army equipment around, but no sign of the missing soldiers. And that's when they chanced upon the Kandahar giant. And I'm going to show you again, they came across a cave. Though the tale grows with the telling, with some reports suggesting that the humanoid grew as tall as 15 feet, which I have to say is kind of reasonable if you're estimating the height of something. If something is that large, I give or take a couple of feet, I don't think makes much of a difference. Anyway, if they were saying, some people were saying that it was 50 feet, okay, yeah, but 2 feet when something is that large, doesn't bother me. Anyway, this red-headed giant with 6 digits, leather moccasins, and smelling like dead bodies suddenly emerged from the cave and impaled one of the soldiers with a spear. Certainly not a pleasant story, is it? And that's when the soldiers opened fire, ultimately felling the giant with 30 seconds of continuous fire. Okay, so I will link this in the description box if you wanted to read the rest of it, but that is the story of the Kandahar giant. And let's go to another story about giants who are linked to cave systems. Red-haired giant cannibals at Lovelock Cave. Really? Now, obviously, this is written by a skeptic, but I still liked the article, and I'm going to share it. But again, we have linked together red hair, giants, caves, and yes, they were definitely known to be cannibals too, and we do know that they were cannibals from the Book of Enoch. So, colorful tales of the American West don't fade away easily, even when they seem to have been discounted, because of course they were discounted. Take, for example, the story of legendary red-haired cannibal giants whose alleged existence in the Lovelock area centuries ago has been debated for more than 100 years. Scientists have said there's no proof of the, quote, giants, and that's probably because, Smithsonian has it. First described in old Indian tales were cannibals. Chemical staining by earth after burial was advanced as a likely reason why mummified remains have red hair instead of black like most Indians in the area, which, again, it doesn't fly with me because stories of giants, they very often have red hair, no matter where in the world they are found. A University of Nevada study in the mid-1970s indicated the giants were about 6 feet tall and not up to 10 feet tall as had been claimed. And honestly, that goes right along with the Smithsonian way of thinking. There are giant bones found all over the world, and then the Smithsonian will shrink them and try to blow it off as nothing out of the ordinary. So let's go to the actual story. And I'm going to say, quote, myth was written down in 1883 by Sarah Winnemucca Hopkins, daughter of a Paiute Indian chief. She told of a strange red-haired tribe of cannibals her ancestors drove into a cave and suffocated by lighting a fire at its entrance. She said the people eaters were so fierce they would leap into the air, snatch arrows whizzing over their heads, and shoot them back at their enemies. The Paiutes named the giants Sitika, which translates to tool eaters. The giants wove tools, a fibrous water plant, into rafts to navigate across what remained of Lake Lahontan, so the story goes. The Paiutes, a Native American tribe indigenous to parts of Nevada, Utah, and Arizona, described the Sitka as a vicious, unapproachable people that killed and ate their captives, and told early settlers that after years of warfare, all the tribes in the area joined together to rid themselves of the giants. The fleeing giants took refuge in Lovelock Cave. The fleeing giants took refuge in Lovelock Cave and refused to leave despite demands that they come out and fight. So their pursuers filled the entrance to the cave with brush that was set on fire in a bid to force the giants to come out. The few that did emerge were promptly killed. The giants that remained inside the cavern were asphyxiated. John T. Reed, a Lovelock mining engineer, said Indians took him to the cave in 1886 and told him the tale of the red-haired cannibal giants. But when he entered the cave, he found nothing but tons of bat guano. So I will leave a link. Again, there's a little bit more to the article, not much. I will leave a link in the description box for this in case you wanted to read it. But there are also stories of giants in the tunnels of, I believe, Mount Shasta. There are so many stories of giants and other creatures in the dumbs that we have all underneath, the country, likely all over the world. And we know for a fact that there are intricate cave systems all over the world. So my hypothesis is that some of the Nephilim escaped the flood by going underground. And I know that people are going to come to me and tell me, well, God said that he was going to flood the whole earth and kill all the living creatures with the flood. And yes, I know. But we also have to remember that there are many times that these fallen beings, they intercede in God's will, and God knows what's going to happen. He already has a plan. He has had a plan from the very beginning. So he has already known. And the fact is that the fallen ones, they interceded in the Garden of Eden and they went against God's will. So we know that it happens. But in Genesis 3, it may be Genesis 3:14. I don't know right off the top of my head, and I didn't think of getting this verse out. But it says that God curses the snake for what happened when he deceived Adam and Eve in the garden. And he says, actually, you know what? I'm just going to look it up. That way I don't have to paraphrase it. Okay, yeah, so I was close. It was Genesis 3:15. But in Genesis 3, God metes out various judgments against those who brought sin into his perfect world. Adam, Eve, and the serpent all hear the consequences of their rebellion. To the serpent, God says in part, "And I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed. It shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel." So, the leader of the Watchers, and the Watchers were the ones who came down from Mount Hermon and impregnated the human women. The leader of them was Azazel. And it is at least Dr. Michael Heiser's contention. Now, Satan himself did not impregnate any of the human women. But it is Dr. Michael Heiser's contention that Azazel, the leader of the Watchers, and Satan are one and the same. So, even though he specifically may not have fathered any of the Nephilim, it was an attack, so to speak, that was orchestrated by him. So, when it says that he will strike, or he will bruise your head and he will strike your heel, I believe that it is regarding, well, at least in part, because a lot of these verses have a double meaning. We know that it has to do with Jesus Christ in the future, but I believe that it also has something to do with the Nephilim. And so the Nephilim, again, are connected to the rephaim. So you might be wondering, all right, Shelley, what are you getting at? Well, I'm getting there. So all of these elaborate cave systems are underneath the earth. And if these Nephilim did get to go underground, and if they lived under there all that time, wouldn't it make sense that they, as they were called the rephaim, would start to be associated with the underworld. Now, the Hebrew word for the underworld is Sheol, and Sheol is associated physically with being underground. So if the rephaim were found to be associated with the underworld, and if they were associated as giants, to me it would make sense that they would start to be called the rephaim after the flood, because these were giants who were literally living underground in Sheol, in the underworld. And so just the change in the name and the meaning of the name rephaim is really what has me thinking, is this evidence that they did use the underground to escape the flood? And were they, after the flood, still living in this cave system? Because I'm sure that it was elaborate. We have to remember that these Nephilim, they had fantastic technology. And so I'm sure and they were actually privy to a lot of things that, were never meant for people outside of heaven, in my opinion. So yeah, to me, it just all came together when I started thinking about the giants living in the cave system, being called the rephaim, giants associated with the underworld. And yes, to the Hebrews, the underworld was a very physical place. It was Sheol, and it is where these rephaim were. Now, I have to say, though, that this is only one theory. I could be wrong. I just think that it's interesting to think about these things, and it kind of made sense to me because I was really struggling with why the rephaim, who were giants, would also be associated with shades and as the underworld and even as evil spirits. So I thought that this could possibly be an explanation because they were literally living in the underground, in the underworld. Now, my friend Donita from over at Prairie Desk, which I've been sharing a couple videos that I've been doing, because we like to have, little panel discussions over there. They're called Tin Hat Talks, and they're a lot of fun. And she actually has another great theory for why the rephaim may be called that. And it is different from my theory, but I think that it is equally valid and equally as interesting. So we're actually going to be doing a video. We're going to be recording a video later on this week in which this discussion will come up. I'm hoping, Lord willing. And so I highly suggest that you would all go check that out. I will post it in my on my community page when she publishes it. I'm not sure exactly when it's going to come out, but yeah, it's definitely worth listening to that video too, because her theory is, she's a very smart lady. Anyway, that's all that I have for you today. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one either here or over on Instagram. And if you like my work and would like to check out my Patreon page, I will leave a link in the description box for that as well. And I hope you have a great day.